Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. It is Jeremy Werner and Joey Wagner, and we got a lot to talk about with Illinois football. We'll catch up with Michael Tulip and Derek Piper later this week for Illinois basketball, but Illinois football enters the second week of the transfer portal. No commitments yet, but a lot of targets here. But the biggest news, of course, and Derek and I hit on it a little bit on Saturday night, is Illinois is getting its quarterback back. Luke Altmyer returning for his final season of eligibility. He does not enter the transfer portal. The All Big Ten honorable mention quarterback who had so many comeback victories to Illinois, led Illinois to a 9-3 season, is returning for a third season of eligibility. So we will talk about the transfer portal. We will talk about who is going to surround Luke Altmyer. But Joey Wagner, this is the biggest win of the offseason. This was like number one on the offseason to-do list, was get your quarterback back, and Illinois gets it done. So what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, it changes the floor. I guess I should say it sets the floor of the program, right? Like, with a third-year quarterback, presumably with the same coordinator for 3 years. I can't imagine Luke Altmyer came back under the assumption that he might have a different one, even though Barry Lunny's a guy who we know is going to be targeted at some point to take that next step. I would have to think those two work hand in hand, or at least that's my thought. You have a guy who's the face of the program, who's got the talent to be the face of the program, who can lead you to, if you surround him right, to another 9-win season, 10-win season. Brett Bielema is going to probably, next time we talk to him, stand up and tout the idea of the playoffs next year with the same quarterback. And he's going to bring up the Heisman Trophy, which is probably a reach, but for Luke Altmyer, it gives you so much hope and optimism for this team next season to know that you've got that guy at a position at Illinois that has just been kind of chaos, right? Like, if you typically, like Brandon Peters was a 3-year starter at Illinois, if I'm remembering, he was, right? Yeah. Luke Altmyer is a better player than Brandon Peters. And you get a guy to come in, and people believe in him. It's clear that team believes in him. I know we had a lot of captain discussions back in August. I don't think that's going to be the same discussion this coming August for Luke Altmyer. I think he's going to be that guy. And face of the program, man. There's a lot of value to that financially, personally, confidence-wise, however you want to quantify it. There's a lot there for Luke Altmyer.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Like, with Luke Altmyer back, one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten this season, and I know you got a list, one of the best returning quarterbacks in the Big Ten, you now have the chance to dream about another 9-win season, dream about a 10-win season in college football playoff contention. Now, I don't think those things are easy. I think it's tough to duplicate what Illinois did this past year, right? I mean, all the close wins that they have, but Luke Altmyer was such a huge part of that. 4 come-from-behind wins, fourth quarter overtime victories for Illinois this season. I think Illinois had the stat. He's got 5 last-minute wins in the last 2 years, which leads the country. So he's one of the most clutch quarterbacks that's been in the country the last couple of years. And I keep saying it, like, he was your competitive advantage this year, along with Pat Bryant, right? Like, that duo was just your competitive advantage over so many teams that felt like they were in a similar place over you in the Big Ten. You won late in those games because of those guys for the most part. Not to take away anything else from the guys who helped you get there, but those guys helped you win those games and close them out. So to get that guy back is just massive for this program. And now you can just look forward to surrounding him and maximizing that final year. But I do want to say this about Luke Altmyer. He could have went in the portal, Joey. Like, he could have went in the portal and been the top quarterback in the transfer portal and demanded a lot of money, like a lot of money. And he's going to get paid here at Illinois, and I think Illinois knew what he was worth to their program. I think Luke and his people probably knew what he was worth to this program, but he could have probably gotten more elsewhere in the SEC. I'd heard SEC programs were willing to pay him a lot of money, and the fact that he's coming back, I think it says what we've been talking about. He's been there. He's done that. He's from Starkville, Mississippi. He played at Ole Miss, and that experience didn't seem to go all that well for him. And it didn't go all that well his first year here, going 5-7, starting off with 7 interceptions in his first 3 games, getting benched late in the season when he really didn't deserve it just because John Paddock went on a heater. But Illinois stuck by him. Barry Lunny and Brett Bielema believed in him. And now they've had this success together, and Luke is doing what he hoped he would do at the Power 4 level. And for me, just him and Lunny is a phenomenal marriage. And him and Brett Bielema, it seems like a really good relationship. So I think he didn't want to mess with happiness. Now, he wanted to get paid what he's worth, and I'm sure he is. But I just think that says a lot about what Illinois has put around him, what Illinois has done for Luke Altmyer, but also Luke being pretty mature and being like, I don't want to mess with happiness, because you go to an SEC program, you don't play well your first 2 games, you might get benched. Here, he is the guy. Like, they're building around him, and obviously he has a lot of confidence in what they're building around him.
Yeah, I think his past experiences are huge. He's gone back to that, right? He's not really ever gotten too far down into what that time at Ole Miss was like for him, but just in picking up what he said, it wasn't really fun. And he was in a quarterback competition every year. He was there, and he got the chance to come to Illinois and be the guy and be the face of the program and show the talents that he believed that he had with the coaching staff that didn't, as you mentioned, didn't lose faith after 7 interceptions. And he said it, being benched effectively for the end of 2022 or 2023 was not a fun experience, but he also said it's why he had 2024 and the value of learning there. I do wonder, it's an interesting exercise to think about. If he would have started at Illinois and not had that experience elsewhere, if he was a high school commit, you could take even Illinois out of it, right? If you're a high school kid, you go somewhere, you don't know anything different. If maybe you're enticed by the SEC opportunity, by the money opportunity, whatever. I mean, whatever the difference between the two, if there was one between SEC programs, what he's going to inevitably get at Illinois, if that changes anything. But it did. I mean, he's had that experience. I think that's the big thing, is he's so mature. He understands that stunk. And, it didn't work out at Ole Miss. If it worked out at Ole Miss, he'd still be there. Ole Miss people would be on the same podcast talking about Luke Altmyer coming back for his final season of eligibility. And here's the thing. We have to acknowledge, I get it. Like, I get it if you're a fan and you hear, like, why is he announcing he's coming back? He had another – that's just what it is these days. I mean, just be glad he's here, right? It's
what it's fun. I mean, but yes, he's a quarterback who would be in high demand, and he means so much to your program. Like, I wrote the other day, like, I would assume we kind of set the mark. What a great way to announce you coming back, to do a video that the first media timeout at number 1 Tennessee in town is an amped up crowd. And I wrote, Joey, like, that felt like the biggest pop in the arena, other than maybe the 8-0 start. Like, it was pretty loud in there. But that was right after the 8-0 start. Luke Altmyer announces he's coming back, and people are going nuts. It was a well-done video. I'm sure Patrick Pearson, the creative guy for Illinois football, had a lot to do with that, but Luke's people as well. So just really well done. And Luke going out to the crowd, saying hello, then, going to talk to some recruits and go get some transfers while he is there. Like, I went up to him and just said, well done. That was really well done. So that – it was theatrical, but I thought it was worthy. It was worthy of the theatrics. It was worthy of the reaction.
Yeah, I joked with him that a little heads up would have been nice as we were sitting there trying to turn a story in the first half of a game against number 1 Tennessee. But to me, I don't know, it kind of showed his growth. Like, he was kind of a quiet guy when he got to Illinois. So to be comfortable in that moment where there's nothing bad that comes out of that moment, right? Everyone's drunk and yelling and they're thrilled that you're announcing it.
Drunk now.
Yeah, I mean, but like, to grab a mic and be in that position and say, like, that to me says growth for Luke Altmyer, just in terms of his comfort here and understanding how much he matters here and how much here matters to him. Like, he touched on that in the video. I don't think you can understate how important his time at Illinois has been to him. Like, he's talked a lot about going to see sports psychiatrists, going to do this or to that, and kind of rebuilding himself after that experience at Ole Miss wasn't what he hoped it would be. It wasn't really, or the first year. That's exactly right. So I think he's felt a lot of personal growth here beyond his 2,500 yards and 21 touchdowns that he had this season. I just think there's so much comfort. He's a guy who doesn't strike me as really, like, say needs much, probably isn't the right way to put it, but he knows happiness and he knows what he's got and how much value that he's found in happiness off the field at Illinois. Can I bring a couple numbers real quick?
Yeah. Can I just add one more thing to this? Because obviously he grew as a player this past season. I think we all saw he got better, whether it was not staying in the pocket for as long. It still can be improved and things like that. But his decision-making was better. But I thought the biggest area he grew, other than maybe trusting his receivers to go make a play for him in one-on-one coverage, was just the toughness, man. The mental toughness, the physical toughness that he showed throughout the year. I just thought he showed so much toughness throughout this season to come back, to lead his team. I thought he showed more leadership this year, but I thought he showed that through toughness, the willing to stand and take a hit for his offensive line, who protected for 4 seconds to allow him the time to, in Pat Bryant, to kind of get open and have a deep shot. So all those things, I just thought he showed so much toughness this year, and to have that guy back leading your team. But yeah, all right. So Big Ten, where does he rank of guys coming back? Is that what you're going to get into?
Well, I've got some numbers that
Okay.
I want to try to put in perspective here. If Luke Altmyer just has this same season, so we're talking 2,543 yards before the bowl game, 21 touchdowns, completing 64% of his passes. If he just, and we'll get into kind of how you duplicate that here in a minute with the transfer portal discussion, but if you just duplicate that year over year, do the same thing, no growth, he is going to finish 7th all time in program history in yards. He's going to finish 3rd all time in program history in passing touchdowns. He's going to be top 6 in completions and tied for somewhere top 2. Now, see, this is where my handwriting gets into play, Jeremy. I'm not very good at that. He's going to be tied. He's going to be tied for 1st in completion percentage career with a minimum of 500 completions.
And I'm pretty sure, unless they count John Paddock, which I think you got to play more than 3 games or start 3 games to do it. But career passing efficiency, he would blow that out of the water. Yeah, they don't count him. So Tony Eason is number 1 at 133.8. Luke's going to be around 140. So he would be the most efficient passer in Illinois history. Obviously, the modern game has something to do with that, some quicker passes, all that, but that'd still be a pretty telling stat.
Yeah, so when we're talking about how big of a deal this is, I think most people know that getting Luke Altmyer back, but sometimes when you're just in that grind of a season and you're kind of living and dying with every drive, you don't zoom out. He's a top 10 quarterback by every metric, and in a lot of them, he's top 5. If he just duplicates, all you got to do is duplicate what was a really good season. I don't want to minimize the challenges of doing that, but it feels like it's attainable. And I think that kind of shows you how good he is and how far this offense has come with him, with Barry Lunny, with some of the weapons they have around him.
Yeah, and I think that stuff matters, right? And I think it might matter to Luke. We'll have to ask him. But the chance to be one of the best quarterbacks in Illinois history at a program that recently hadn't had a ton of great ones, but in its history, I mean, you think of Trudeau, Kittner, Shieldhouse, Juice Williams, Tony Eason, Jeff George, right? That's a pretty good run of quarterbacks. And I think Luke Altmyer would be in the same breath as those guys, especially if he leads another winning season. Shieldhouse had 2 winning seasons. Juice Williams had 1 great season leading a winning team. Kittner obviously led the program back. I think you'd be talking about Altmyer in that Kittner kind of level. And that's pretty cool. That's just a really cool thing if you can be one of those guys, because think about when those guys come back to campus, what Illinois means to them and what they mean to these programs. So, getting him back, I don't know if it leads to 9 wins. I don't know if it leads to a college football playoff. If he stays healthy, this team's going to go to a bowl game with him, right? I would be shocked if they do not make a bowl game, and it just continues that program momentum. We'll talk about it here in a second, but now you add around him and you can build around him. It just gives you this huge cornerstone. But among returning quarterbacks, Joey, Luke's what, top 3, 4 in the Big Ten?
Among returners, right? Among returners, there's going to be a lot of variance for your big programs, So we'll just go down right now. Dylan Gabriel out of eligibility for Oregon. Drew Aller announced he's back. Billy Edwards is in the transfer portal. Will Howard, I believe, is gone, correct?
Yeah.
Curtis Rourke, gone. Ethan Garbers, that is something I would have to jump in on UCLA's quarterback.
I would go with Altmyer over him anyway.
Right. I'm just going straight down the list. Max Brosmer, gone. Dylan Raiola, I think there's a ton of reason to be excited about Dylan Raiola in college football. Miller Moss, gone to Louisville. Then you got Luke Altmyer, Ethan Kaliak-Manis. Aiden Childs is someone who's incredibly talented. Obviously, Wisconsin is bringing in a new quarterback. Now, Oregon's got Dante Moore sitting there waiting in the wings. Ohio State is going to be fine. Michigan is going to be fine in the big picture, you would think. Maybe we thought that going in last season and we were wrong. But among returning quarterbacks, this guy is in the top 3.
Yeah, I would
Aller and Raiola.
Aller, Raiola, and Altmyer would be the top. And, Rail is really talented, and I expect a huge leap out of him going from a true freshman being a 67% completion guy, 12 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. That's about what you expect out of a true freshman as talented he is. I think he'll take a big step forward. But yeah, I think Altmyer is in that top three. I'm sure Dante Moore will be great. I'm sure whoever Ohio State will have will be great. Bryce Underwood at Michigan, is he the starter right away as a freshman? Maybe he's more like Raiola, which would be a huge improvement for Michigan. I think Aiden Childs can take a step forward, but I mean, Aller's really good. There's times I like Altmyer better than Aller. And Aller's probably the better pro prospect because he's bigger, he's really athletic, and I'm not trying to take anything away from him. And I thought he was a lot better this year. But outside of Aller, I think you can. Then you're talking about a toss up with Rail or whoever else you want to bring up. Like Illinois has one of those guys. Like that's a pretty high floor.
Yeah, there's not going to be preseason rankings where Luke Altmyer is ranked 15, 16, 17 again going into next season. It's just that's what we're saying. I mean, and we're kind of weirdo people in a lot of ways, but in the sense of how we think, like I almost texted you the other day, hey, who's going to be team captains next year? That guy's going to be one of them. And I was going to say, who's going to Big Ten Media Days next year? And I know there's the Citrus Bowl, there's a portal, and there's so many more things to worry about. That's how our brains work. That guy's going, right? Like, so then we talk about just the faces of not only Illinois, but in terms of quarterback faces in the Big Ten, he's going to be in that conversation. Again, there's going to be a lot of excitement for your Oregons, your Ohio States, your Michigans, whatever you want to talk about. But he's going to be in that conversation of when you're talking about Big Ten, the Big Ten's best quarterbacks, being one of the best quarterbacks, one of the two best conferences. There's a lot of that, and that's not insignificant.
Yeah. By the way, this is very off topic, but you brought it up. Like Brett Bielema has a lot of choices next year for Big Ten Media Days. Didn't feel like he had a lot this year. But Josh McCray, Josh Kreutz, he might want to take. I don't know if Melvin Priestley would be one of those guys. If Gabe Backus or Xavier Scott come back, we'll talk about that here in a second. Dylan Rosiak, Miles Scott, Matthew Bailey. Like that's a pretty dang good list of guys I think could go to Media Day.
I spent way too much time in December thinking about this last week. Like Luke's one, so you got two more. He typically likes to take a big man, right? That's a Brett Bielema staple. So
Gabe
maybe that's
gone, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you would take him again if you get him back because you want to kind of show the Big Ten that, hey, this dude's back, by the way.
Outland Trophy candidate or something, yeah.
100%. They're going to, if that happens, they're going to push that all the way to the moon. Josh Kreutz is someone, I think Josh Kreutz might be like, hey, you know what, Coach?
I'm good.
I'm good here. Can I text in? How do you want to do this? Matthew Bailey's a candidate. Miles Scott is a candidate. Typically, he's not taking transfers, so I don't know that, unless they get some sort of big-time, presumably wide receiver that Brett Bielema wants to get all the cameras on, and I think that's probably still
likes cameras, unlike Zachary Franklin.
Yeah, and I think even Brett Bielema still would be like, I'm going to take a Matthew Bailey. Matthew Bailey feels like the guy to me because he's so stinking good in front of all that stuff. No one cares about that, Jeremy. It's transfer portal talk, but that's kind of how we think.
All right, I want to bring this up because Luke Altmyer is not a transfer, but there's no bigger win. I think the next two biggest wins that Illinois can have this offseason are not a transfer. They are Xavier Scott and Gabe Backus. These are like, if you get those two back plus Luke Altmyer, obviously you got to fill some spots at tackle. You got to fill some spots at defensive line. You got to add a wide receiver. But if you can find a way to get those guys back, I think that would be bigger than any transfer that they can add. So Xavier Scott, I think would be a mid to late round pick, probably day 3. I feel like you can get him back. Gabe Backus is probably the bigger question because he's probably more of the borderline day 2, day 3 pick. Can he be a 3rd round pick? Would he want to go? Or would he want to do the Johnny Newton, come back for a 4th season and really have a chance to improve yourself? But I want to bring this up because there are no transfer commits yet for Illinois a week into the transfer portal opening up. But you know what else hasn't happened, Joey? You haven't lost anyone that you feel like, oh, that's a big loss. And I'm not sure how many programs in the country can say that. You've lost a few guys from your 2 deep. Donovan Leary, your backup quarterback, which it kind of was a big sign that Luke Altmyer was coming back, right? When Donovan Leary decided to enter the transfer portal. Get it for him. He's got 2 years of eligibility left. Go find a place where he can at least compete to be a starter. He could have stayed here for another year, been a backup, waited for Luke Altmyer to get hurt, which hasn't happened very often here at Illinois. and maybe compete for a job in 2026, but he wasn't guaranteed to be the starter here in 2026. Would Illinois add a transfer? Would Illinois see Trey Petty take a huge leap, or Carson Boyd be ready for something like that? So that one makes sense. You was your kick returner in Kanari Wilcher, but he was the third slot guy. I think you can find a kick returner. Plus, you don't return kicks very much. And then you lost a couple offensive linemen who early were in the two deep, and Kevin Wigginson and Hunter Whitenack. And then you lost Henry Boyer, who played the most snaps of any guy who was under the portal so far. It was just over 100. He was your third tight end, and he probably would have been your third tight end again. So Illinois got to add some depth at tight end, certainly. I know they got 2 weeks left in the portal, but this looks like it's going to be another strong retention thing, another strong retention year for Brett Bielema. And I know retaining players is not sexy, Joey. It does not go in your transfer portal ranking. It is not some new toy that you can add. But you know what was more important last year than any transfer addition they made?
Gabe Ackes coming back?
Keeping Pat Bryant and keeping Gabe Ackes. That made you go from potentially a 5-win team to a 9-win team, right? Like those two players along with Luke Altmyer. 2 years ago, I know we don't think about this because they didn't make a bowl game. But what if you had not kept Isaiah Williams and Johnny Newton? You won 5 games, a lot on those guys' backs. If you didn't have them, would you have been a 2-win team? And what are we talking about right now with this program? If that had happened, you have a bottoming out like that. And then just Brett Bielema originally, guys like Owen Carney and Isaiah Gay, like Alex Palczewski. He has retained players in this program, and for a program like Illinois, that is so important. So I'm going to keep banging that drum. I get it. Transfers are important, and Illinois had a good transfer class last year, getting 5 starters. But retaining your best players has been a huge strength of Illinois under Brett Bielema, and it should not go underappreciated or unnoticed.
Yeah, and maybe if you hear that, you think, well, teams can't talk to players if they're not in the portal. Okay. Maybe they can't talk to players. Maybe they don't talk to players. But everyone in that circle knows there's not a college football player who can command NIL in the country right now who doesn't know what their value would be at insert other school, right? Everyone knows. And if maybe they don't know, their circle knows. Whether it's their agent, whether it's their high school coach, whether it's mom, dad, brother, sister, whoever, someone knows what their value is. So it's not like Pat Bryant would have had to take a leap of faith to go in the transfer portal and, just hope that. He was probably well aware of what his value would have been to a team, probably in the SEC, maybe the Big 12 and closer to home, or in the Big 10.
Johnny Newton and Gabe Ackes were probably very aware.
They know what their value. Luke Altmyer, I have to think, was very aware of what his value was had he jumped in that portal. So, yeah, retaining those guys matters. And I think you can even, I don't know if this is a reach. You can tell me if it is. I hope you would. If you're a wide receiver, and you see Pat Bryant come back, instead of going to insert powerhouse program here and making X amount of dollars, and you see him have the kind of season that he had, let's be honest, he should have been a first-team All-Big Ten by everyone, and he wasn't. He was by the Associated Press. And you see him, he's probably a day –
and by this guy.
And by Jeremy.
Just go on the record.
You see him, as I think it's probably fair to say, assume going into the draft, he's a day 2 NFL draft pick.
I think he should.
Yes, I think he's going to test well. I think that's going to, that's still got to manifest itself. You can see you can do it at Illinois, and you can still get paid at Illinois. You don't have to leave and go somewhere else just for the sake of, man, are they going to find me? Or are scouts going to see what I'm able to do here? That used to be the case. If you were a wide receiver 8 years ago, you didn't have a quarterback to get you the ball. Yeah, I probably would now. Portal is different, of course, but I probably would have gone somewhere else where I know I could have really maximized my final year and made myself look more attractive to NFL teams. You can accomplish that here at Illinois. And I think that's a big deal if you're a younger player, if you're an outside linebacker, if you're a wide receiver. You were Pat Bryant. You saw Isaiah Williams and Casey Washington. That matters to those guys who think, okay, I don't have to go somewhere to get noticed. And I don't think that should be overlooked. And of course, now you've got a quarterback who going to get you the ball. And if you're a transfer portal wide receiver, you're probably looking for a quarterback who's going to get you the ball. A lot of things are starting to come into place more beyond just what Brett Bielema is really proud about, how he's built things at Illinois. Now there's on-field, there's next level kind of points of data that you can say, hey, this can all be done here. Make good money, find my way to the NFL draft, not bad. And I'm comfortable. And I think there's so much value to that, even if you can't quantify it.
Yeah, and I think your Brian example probably speaks to a guy like Malik Kelsey, right? Like, haven't done what I want to yet, but I saw what Pat did. I saw the work he put in, and I saw the results of that under this coaching staff. And then Gabe Akis saw what Johnny Newton did with extra time in this program. Xavier Scott saw what Quan Martin and Sidney Brown and Devin Witherspoon did in this program. So I think all that stuff feeds on itself, but there's also got to be having fun here. Right? Like, you gotta be having fun here. You got to feel like you're developing. You got to feel like you're being taken care of here, and that this is the best place to take you to the next level. So you got to give credit to Brett Bielema and his staff, certainly for that. But Illinois does need to add some players. They do need to fill some holes here, Joey. And we're 1 week in, and other schools are getting commits, but Illinois hasn't gotten one yet. So I will just ask you broadly: scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Tofticle's level of freaking out, and 1 being don't care. What is your concern level of Illinois having no commitments a week into the portal?
There's going to be like 5 message board people who are going to like do like the Leo, like the pointing thing. 3, maybe. That feels kind of high. You would have liked 1, right? I think there's a lot of value into getting 1 early, especially when you've had a couple significant targets on campus. Of course, you don't want those guys go see another program.
Yeah.
And to go hear another pitch. It's just, yes, you want them to commit on campus. The same way you want every official visitor in July to sit in Brett's office and hug him and say, I can't wait to spend my next 5 years of life with you. I understand that. Mm-hmm. On the other side, those guys aren't leaving Illinois from their visits and immediately committing elsewhere. Your targets that you've hosted to this point are still on the board. And that's not insignificant either, where you still have a chance, even though, this player is visited and has now taken a visit to, Miles McVay is a good example. He was here. We saw him at the basketball game. It's reported he's going to visit Carolina and Syracuse. He's not committed to Carolina and Syracuse. He's still on your board. He's still available for you to get. So until those guys start leaving their visits and start committing elsewhere in bunches, I don't really know that I've got a ton of concern beyond just the buzz it gets you, the peace of mind it gets you knowing that, okay, now you got a left tackle, now you got a wide receiver, now you got a defensive lineman. Other than that, these things kind of have to play out. That's the portal, and for some schools it doesn't. For some schools it's very instant. You can go look at the Texas Tech right now, or Texas A&M, one of the 2 tech. They're getting portal commits in bunches. Minnesota's getting a bunch of them. But until those guys start falling off, I don't know that I'm really going to lose it.
Yeah, Minnesota has, I think, 9 or 10 transfer commitments. The Fleck thing, he closes quickly. We know that from his history. Some solid players. There's no 4 stars involved there, but a solid job of filling some depth for Minnesota. Wisconsin had a good weekend. They got their quarterback, Danny O'Neill, got a defensive lineman, and Parker Peterson, who should start for him. Tanner Kojal out of Ball State, good tight end. Got an edge guy, Mason Rieger, who just looks like a Wisconsin edge. But they've also lost 2 of their top quarterbacks. They've lost 3 starting defensive linemen and a bunch of depth from their secondary. Nebraska added 4-star defensive lineman Williams Nwerny, was a former 5-star prep prospect, came in from Missouri. But they've also lost key defensive starters to Florida State, Ole Miss, LSU. Indiana's kind of brought in some lower-level guys, but you kind of go across the Big Ten. There hasn't been a lot of movement in yet of transfers.
Oregon got a huge commit at safety, Dylan T. Thieneman, yes. He's
really good. I'm just saying, like, there hasn't been a lot of movement quite yet. So listen, last year at this time, I don't think Illinois had a commit. J.C. Davis, I think, took about a week and a half, 2 weeks to happen. Cole Rusk was the other big one. I think Clay Patterson the first one that they got. He didn't even end up here. Anthony Johnson was a good win. Kevin Wigginton ended up being a good win. They ended up getting most of their big guys in the spring. I mean, Zakari, Terrence Brooks obviously didn't work out, at least to this point, but Torrey Cox was a spring guy as well, added General Hunt in the spring. So obviously you don't want to leave all of that to there, but Illinois ended up getting some good ones. Illinois will get some commits, and I think they will find enough players because there's a lot of talent in the portal, and Illinois has a really, really good sell. But you also don't want to just add a player. Illinois needs to add good players. They need to add upgrades, especially at tackle, wide receiver, defensive line. And I think they'll find those. They're still having visits. But if you're some of these transfers that are in demand, Joey, with the money the way it is now, and from what I've understood, teams are kind of unloading their NIL budgets before the revenue sharing comes in. I don't know how all of this is going to work, but it's made for a crazy market of high prices. And listen, I don't know. I don't think Illinois is cheap here. I think they got a lot of good resources behind them going into this offseason, but you also don't want to get crazy with it and spend stupidly. So I just think we got to be patient, and we can judge after January 5th, after all these visits are done, or probably better mid-January, how Illinois did addressing its biggest needs. But I have no doubt they're going to add a good offensive lineman. They're going to add a good wide receiver. They're going to add some defensive linemen that can help. We're just kind of waiting right at this point. And I know patience is hard when some other schools are getting commits, but I have no doubts Illinois will get some good ones.
Yeah, this time a year ago, it was Clay Patterson, Anichi Sledge, and Anthony Johnson. They were all committed. And then Chase Canada committed on the 15th. So they were all committed by December 15th. Obviously, remember the signing day was pushed back.
Yeah.
It was back a little further. Kevin Wigginton and J.C. Davis were both on the 20th. They were signing day guys. And then nothing until Cold Rusk on January 5th. So, like, there's still a lot of time. But here's the thing. Like, I get it. I understand if you're watching all these other teams get players and you kind of have portal envy. And part of that portal envy is because you know your team is active, right? It's one thing. I mean, we've talked about this before, Jeremy, like trade deadlines or free agency where, you know, we follow teams that maybe that aren't like the off-season winners or the press conference winners, whatever you want to.
And either one team has one when the offseason, it doesn't end up well. So,
right. Like, so we understand that, like, to watch other teams build up rosters around when your team maybe is a little quieter. I get where you can kind of get a little like, hey, what's going on here? Especially when you know Illinois is going to be in the portal. They're going to be active in the transfer portal. There's a lot of time, man. To me, we judge when the second semester starts and these guys have to be on campus for spring practices and see what it looks like, or just frankly, when your targets start falling off the board, when and if those targets start falling off the board, and then it's all of a sudden you're on your what was clearly a priority fourth offensive tackle or fourth wide receiver. Then I think we can say, oh, okay, well, maybe this 2 weeks hasn't gone like they probably thought it would have gone.
Yeah, let's be honest. A lot of us are in the dark right now. I get why a school would want to be quieter about his portal pursuits, Joey, because like you can schedule a visit and then that guy ends up going somewhere else, and you can think you have a good chance with this guy, and then things change so quickly. You might think this guy's a target, and then you end up with another guy who you like even better a week later. It's just crazy how quickly this stuff moves, right? It starts December 9th. The portal window closes December 28th. You can have them on visits until the 22nd, and then you can have them on visits again, January 1st through the 5th. And then, yes, as you said, it's going to matter when are they on campus. Mid-January is when we should know who you're adding in the winter, right? And then there's another spring portal window open April 16th through the 25th. But we can tell the biggest needs so far, they're addressing, right? Like they are getting who we know has been on campus, offensive linemen, wide receivers, defensive linemen. Yeah, Miles McVay from Alabama. I don't know if any other offensive linemen have visited. I know they were trying to get Luke Baklenko out of Stanford. He committed to Texas A&M, I believe, this morning. Wide receiver, they've had Dane Key from Kentucky, one of the top overall wide receiver prospects in the portal. You look for a Pat Bryant replacement, he's about as good and as equal as it can get at a bad passing offense. He put up big numbers for Kentucky. But when you're going for a guy like that, who else is involved? Georgia, Ole Miss, right? That one's going to be difficult, but Justin Stepp has a really tight relationship with him. A name that, man, when I heard he was on campus, I was like, God, I haven't heard that name in so long. I felt like Obi-Wan Kenobi. It is, yeah, Joey didn't understand that one either. Chaz Nimrod, Tennessee transfer, started 6 games for them the last 2 years, played 600 snaps, didn't put up huge numbers, but he's a guy with the SEC experience that I think would be a starter for Illinois. He was here on campus. Luke Altmyer and Barry Odom were talking into a lot during the Tennessee game here, which was fitting. He was here for the Tennessee game, by the way. So they're obviously hitting that one, and then they had a couple of defensive linemen on campus. I know Wisconsin's James Thompson Jr. has been a big target of theirs. But they also had a kid from Coastal Carolina here on campus as well, Will Whitson, over the weekend. David Blay, nose tackle out of Louisiana Tech, was here midweek. He visited Penn State. So they're getting some pretty intriguing guys here on campus. Like, they're shooting high, Joey. Like, these are some of the top of the portal names, and they're getting some of these guys on campus. Now we'll see if they can land them.
Yeah, and kind of we thought they would go in probably armed with some NIL, armed on the offensive side of the ball with a quarterback and an offensive coordinator who can really pitch. It wasn't a coincidence to me that Luke Altmyer went down and, got his big, hug from the whole State Farm Center and then sat back next to Chaz Nimrod for the whole game. I mean, the entire game. You and I kept looking over there, and Luke Altmyer, I think someone may have asked for a picture, and I'm sure Luke did it, but he was right in the middle of a conversation with Chaz Nimrod and kept going with that. Like that's a portal pitch, right? And it's significant. So, yeah, I think you've seen them not try to money ball, which is frankly what we've seen Illinois do in the past in the portal, is try to find maybe some under-the-radar guys, some of which have panned out, 100%, some of which have panned out. We see them start to get in those punching matches with Big Ten, SEC, ACC, Big 12 schools and try to reel in some big fish. We'll see if they do it, and I think that's the next big thing. But I'm really fascinated by the way they've come out and shooting high. I also have a pitch for you, Jeremy.
Okay.
On signing day, and you're the superlative, we were trying to figure out the recruiter of the year, right, or the recruiter of the cycle. We should push that back to when the second semester starts and revisit then. So when we pod, when this portal dust settles, I think it's fair to include that in there, because as you start naming these guys and the connections Justin Stepp has, I think he could be a guy who's in that conversation when you talk about Braden Trimble, when you talk about who they get out of the transfer portal, and they're going to get a wide receiver out of the transfer portal. I just think it would be interesting to look at that, that in totality after the transfers, because those are big pitches, and Justin Stepp is a really, really big asset. And that's, of course, so is Terrence Jameson, and the way he's developed, you can go right on down the line. But I'm curious how that all shakes out.
I want to bring up the wide receiver thing, because we talked about like that would be one of our marquee additions along with left tackle, right? I think we definitely would say Dane Key is one of those. Miles McVay has not proven himself to be a marquee player, but I think you're going to have to pay a marquee price for him. He's now visiting North Carolina and Syracuse, at least has those visits set up. So obviously there's competition here, and competition creates a higher price for what that would be. So is Illinois willing to invest that in Miles McVay, who's not as proven but has a great pedigree? We will see. But Dane Key would certainly be that, and I would spend a lot to get a guy like that, who probably would be a draft pick. Like, no doubt would be a draft pick in the NFL right now. So the fact that Georgia and Ole Miss are involved tell you what his market is. But Justin Bowick is going to be on campus too. Started his career at Eastern Illinois, 6'4", 200 pounds. But he's visited Penn State and Kentucky already. Now he's going to visit Illinois, according to Matt Zenitz and Chris Hummer from 24/7 Sports. He only played 4 games last year at Ball State, but in those games, he had 20 receptions for 383 yards. He had a 171-yard performance against Miami, Ohio, which has a great defense, and 148 yards against Buffalo, which are 2 pretty good MAC programs. So he's kind of shown that he can play at the FBS level. He would be another good addition. Like him and Chaz Nimrod, I know are not Dane Key. But, Joey, you had even one of those players who I think would pretty assuredly be a starter for Illinois, at least a top 4 guy. That lifts the floor, and you let Malik Elzy, Alex Kapka-Jones, Colin Dixon, Hank Beatty, Mario Sander, you let all those guys compete. I think that'd be a talented wide receiver room, a little unproven, but that still would be an upgrade for me. So I still think guys like that, even if Dane Key was on campus and you're like, got to get that guy, got to get that. We know how hard it is. But if you can add one of those guys and maybe another receiver, that's a pretty talented room for Luke Altmyer.
It is. And, yeah, you're right. Dane Key's the guy, when that possibility is there, you're all in on that. But there are other options out there, guys with pedigree. I know the staff, from what I understand, at least defensively, is really interested in production. And I think you've seen that play out in the way that they've had guys on campus. But we can't, for as much as we get into this portal player, that portal player, at some point we have to talk about returners and steps forward, right? And I think that can be overlooked when you get, and we do it. So when I say you get, I mean us too, where you get so locked in on what a new face could bring to this program.
You brought up Moneyball, and I just listened to a podcast about Moneyball. I listened to the Rewatchables with Bill Simmons and all that. I love listening to that. And they were talking about like the Moneyball aspect of it. It's like you don't replace Jason Giambi with one player. Like you're not going to replace Pat Bryant with one player unless it's Dane Key.
Yeah.
Right? Unless
then you got to replace Malik Elsie too, right? So like you can push it right down the line.
But can you replace that 900 yards with Malik Elsie, Justin Bullock, Hank Beatty, Colin Dick? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I think you can, because you got to spread those targets around, and you just might be doing it a little differently. It's not Luke Altmyer going to it's definitely going to Pat Bryant here. Like he can maybe go through his progressions a little bit more and find the best matchup and have a few more guys that he can trust. And you're probably going to rotate guys a lot more. So yeah, the way we look at it, we want to replace one guy with one guy. One guy's probably not replacing Pat Bryant. But listen, like last year we said, how are they going to replace Isaiah Williams? Well, they went and got Zachary Franklin, who's a different receiver. And Pat Bryant took a huge step in his development. So a guy like Hank Beatty could be a 30-40 catch guy next year. Colin Dixon, 30-40 catch guy next year. Malik Elsie could turn into a starter, maybe have a breakout season. You just want to add another player or two that lift that room even more.
Yeah, and we can't overlook the steps of those guys. Like even back in April, we had penciled in Terrence Brooks and Xavier Scott as the two starting cornerbacks, probably Tyler Strain at that star position. Well, it ends up being Xavier Scott at the star position, Caleb Patterson and Torrey Cox out at your outside cornerback. We had spent the better part of October and early November talking about, man, they have got to get a linebacker in the portal. They have just, there's no way around it. It's got to be an inside linebacker. Well, then all of a sudden,
I don't think they've offered a linebacker.
That's right. All of a sudden, Malachi Hood looks like he's kind of taken a little bit of a step. That's still got to carry through spring ball, winter conditioning, all of that. You talk about James Cruz, get significant reps, and you see what they liked out of him as a player. So it's not always
Conte and Grant Bierman too.
100%. So it's not always you have to replace via the portal, even though that's sexy and that's fun to monitor and it gets some buzz when you know that this player is coming in. And I don't want to try to. This isn't me trying to set the expectations of Illinois not getting guys in the portal. They're going to get guys in the transfer portal, but I think it's in the month of December and the months of December, January, February, do you agree? You kind of just get lost in all of the, okay, new face. It's got to be a new face. Which freshman can come in? Because that's fun. And it's fun to learn new players and understand what they can bring. But also that internal, that Aiden Lawfrey step forward this season, that Caleb Patterson, that Hank Beatty, that Colin Dixon. Don't overlook that, because as you're trying to replace some of those big guys, and some are going to be more difficult to replace. Pat Bryant, Zachary Franklin, those are tough guys to replace within your offense. If you've got to replace Gabe Akis, that's a tall task to do. That is 100% true. But you can also do that with guys that are coming back, and that's what Brett Bielema wants his program to be, is that developmental program. And sure, that can be boring when there's really, really financially just rich programs out there getting new players. But I just feel like that gets overlooked sometimes, Jeremy, when we're talking about all this.
And it will be interesting, Joey, to see who hits the portal as the college football playoff goes along, right? Like you get the first games this weekend, I believe, and those teams get knocked out. Who enters the portal? Guys who are in the college football playoff through January, like they have another window that they have, like a 5-day window they can enter the portal. So there'll still be more guys entering the portal throughout the next couple of weeks as well.
Hey, listen, Illinois is going to have more guys entering the portal.
Yeah, I'm surprised there isn't more.
This is legit just a math thing right now. This isn't we're hearing X or Y. This is just straight up math. And Illinois is going to have more guys go portaling. That's 100% going to happen.
Yeah, I'm surprised there hasn't been more. Like there's some guys on the roster that you and I are probably shocked are still here, and people can speculate who that is. Go on the list of the roster and be like, oh, that 3 deep guy's still here, or that guy who didn't play that much is still here. So yeah, the one thing I wanted to mention is Henry Boyer hitting the portal. They were trying to find upgrades at tight end, right? Like I think that is obviously fair to say. But now, like, you lose 2 of your top 3 guys from last year. And I know Cole Russ comes back, but he's coming off a serious knee injury. Tanner Arkin comes back, phenomenal blocker. But they like to have 4 ready to play tight ends. And that was a position that, as good as Tanner Arkin was, like, you felt like you only had one kind of way to play at that position. Carson Goda was serviceable. I'll give him that, but undersized, obviously, at this level. But used 300 snaps at that tight end position. Cole Rusk, you hope, comes back and is the player you hope he was going to be. But that position, they need at least one guy who can play in the rotation and maybe 2. Now that Henry Boyer is gone, unless they think Jake Furtney is ready to be that 4th guy. But they're pretty young at that position, right? That's all I'm saying. Like, I don't know who else has played, right? Tanner Hollinger hasn't played. They lose Henry Boyer, they lose Carson Goda. So that position, I'm interested to see what they add, because they need at least one. I'm wondering if they had 2.
Yeah, and probably if they go the route of 2, I would imagine somebody with more pass catching value is 1, and somebody with maybe a little bit more Henry Boyer, like, probably more primarily a blocker with that value is as the other one, or it's a Jake Furtney or a Tanner Hollinger, and they feel good about how they've developed. That might still be a little bit young for what I would think would be comfortable at that position, given how much they want that position to be important. It certainly is a blocking component. That is where that
personnel. With how much 12 personnel that Barry Lunny said, like, if you go in with only 3 tight ends you're comfortable with, one gets hurt, like that's a precarious position to be.
Yeah, I would imagine 2, and maybe the second one's a spring window guy. We'll see how all of that plays out, but I have to think 1 is coming, during this before classes start window for Illinois. But that position's gotten interesting, and Henry Boyer, that's the second biggest loss from the portal so far. Donovan Leary's your backup quarterback. He's a snap away. He's got to be number 1. But Henry Boyer's not nothing. I mean, he played a lot of snaps. He showed himself as a blocker. You would have liked to see him more as a pass catcher. He didn't have a ton of opportunity in that regard, but you're talking about a guy who was solidified in the 2 deep at that position. And you kind of saw the writing on the wall, right? Not only with the offers of tight ends that we had seen kind of pop up over the last week, but the body types, the play types of the tight ends that they were offering. A lot of them are like, oh, that might be a Henry Boyer replacement if that's what happens and Henry Boyer enters the portal. So we'll see. But I mean, that's a top 2 loss to this point for Illinois in the transfer portal.
We will be able to catch up with some Illinois players. Hopefully, Brett Bielema. We'll see about coaches later this week to talk about bowl prep, Joey, as they continue to get ready for the Citrus Bowl, which is 15 days away from when we're recording this on Monday, December 16th. What a great opportunity for some of those guys. And as we talked about, like wide receiver, we get to see some of those guys. Reminds me of defensive back when they had a couple guys, Sidney Brown and Devin Witherspoon sitting out. Matthew Bailey and Xavier Scott got to play big roles in that game, kind of propelled them forward into their next year. So we get that to look forward to. But is there anything else you want to add before we get out of here, whether it's on the portal or Illinois preparing for the bowl?
Not really. I am just ready to talk to some players about what this has been and
Luke
what
about
it means. And Luke Altmyer about coming back. Since you brought it up, I'm curious, and I think the answers are fairly obvious, but who are your Matthew Bailey, Xavier Scott? I mean, Kaneno DeLuga, remember, he was a guy we talked to after the ReliaQuest Bowl and, what he could look like. Who do you have a guy or 2 or 3 from this bowl that you're ready to? I'm sure Malik Elzy and Alex Kapka-Jones fit on that list. Who you think they could propel this into spring ball?
I'm wondering if Colin Dixon plays more on the perimeter. I'd like to see that because I think Hank Beatty has earned reps at slot. I think he's really good, and I think his quarterback trusts him a lot. I'm interested to see Brandon Henderson continue to progress as an offensive lineman, but really outside linebacker, right? Seth Coleman being out of this game. We'll see what Gabe does. Alec Bryant, sounds like Brett Bielema made it sound like he's going to be back for next year. He's going to play a big role. And now that I started diving into his numbers, it was his best season. Like it was his best season production wise. But Daniel Brown, does he get more snaps? JoJo Hayden, Joe Barna, your boy. And then obviously, can Malachi Hood continue to expand on this? Because those linebackers, they're obviously going to be playing a very good South Carolina team with a great quarterback. So I think some of those athletic linebackers are going to be significant in defending against him. So Lenore Sellers being him, he's going to be he was one of the best SEC quarterbacks this year. He's going to be one of the best next year for sure. Those are some of the guys. Probably outside linebacker, and wide receiver. Those are the groups I'm really interested to see.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't really have much more. I just thought the way that they presented Luke Altmyer on Saturday was really cool. Is my understanding it's kind of been hey, keep a window open during the media timeouts throughout the course of the week, but it was very quiet as to what that was. And again, I want to bring up, like, just because Luke Altmyer waited until Saturday to let everybody else know doesn't mean that nobody knew. Like, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I did a little digging, and they felt pretty confident that he was coming back.
Dane Key probably isn't coming to campus if he doesn't know who the quarterback is going to be.
Right.
Chaz Nimrod probably isn't coming to campus if he doesn't know who the quarterback is going to be. So I know there was a lot of hand-wringing for a couple, week or so. Like, what's Luke going to do? Look at who's coming to campus. They know probably who's going to be there for Illinois at quarterback. And the other thing I want to mention, I know it's only December, and there's December 16th. There's a lot that can go through, but to this point, coaching staff remains in place. We saw many of them over the course of last week, whether it be versus Wisconsin or versus Tennessee at the State Farm Center recruiting. Again, there's still a lot of coaching carousel moves that have to go here, but to see all those guys there, well, I think it's worth bringing up.
Yeah, you never know because some of this happens in January. The NFL stuff can move player. Like Charlie Bowen was pulled out last year, so that stuff can still happen. But I think it's a worthy thing to talk about. And something I asked Brett Bielema about. He clearly wants to keep as much continuity as possible. And after 2 years of a lot of turnover, I think that's key. Just the continuity of this roster and of this team. Think about it. You could return 16 starters, 15, 16 starters next year on offense and defense. You can return most of your staff. You return your coordinators, your offensive coordinator for a fourth year. I think, was Loxley the last one who had 4 years as an offensive coordinator at Illinois? I think that's right. Cubitt had 3. Rod Smith had 3. Which kudos to Rod Smith, Jacksonville State interim head coach. Might be heading to West Virginia with Rich Rod again.
Love that for Rod, by the way, because I feel like that just one of the better people you can come across in this industry, and to be able to be with Rich Rod, a guy who matters so much to him, and kind of back on this come up back into the Power Four, it's really cool to see for him.
I got to ask you, what do you think of Belichick at North Carolina?
What's our guy Tom Fornelli? Love the hire. No idea if it's going to work. I don't even know how much I love it. It's so interesting. It is beyond just him. The way he builds his staff is going to be fascinating in terms of what he looks for. And do you go a little more college heavy? Do you go with guys in the NFL that you've trusted a great deal? I don't know. I thought bringing back Freddie Kitchens was a really big deal for him to keep that. Not only is it Freddie Kitchens a holdover, pretty good one. Got some ties to a certain Mount Zion tight end that he's done a really good job recruiting J.C. Anderson. So if you want to think about locally what that would mean, that's something seriously to monitor. I think he's going to get talent. I think Bill Belichick's going to get talent because he's freaking Bill Belichick, and that is going to resonate with a lot of people. Still got to recruit kids, and I just am so interested by how, I don't know if I have a serious thought one way or the other of how it's going to go. I'm just fascinated to watch the show.
I think it's far better he's coming in now, right, with a more NFL style, right? Like it's free agency. You just go get players, and money is part of it, and NFL development is part of it. What's the churn rate going to be under him? He's tough to play for. I mean, he's demanding, but obviously he gets a lot out of players. How does he evaluate at this level? I mean, I think that was the biggest question about him late in his career was his drafting and his evaluation and building a roster. So I'm interested to see that. But they're supplying him with resources. I think he will do fine there. Will he lead them to being a premier power? I have doubts about that. But I do think with the rules the way they are now, like Lovie Smith, there's always how stubborn is he being, right? While he was here. How much does he really want to coach at this level? How much is he willing to change himself to adapt to college? I wonder about, Belichick with like donors and all of that. Like, how's that going to go? How's he going to deal with media at this level when it's more, it's not quite as harsh, right? It's different when you're covering a college program compared to an NFL program, I think, for some people. And it's more PR. You got to be more PR than what Belichick usually does. So I'm wondering how that stuff happens. But I do think Belichick, like, he cares a lot about succeeding now. Like, I think he feels spurned by the NFL and he wants to show them all. Like, I just feel like there's a bigger chip on Belichick's shoulder right now than there ever was with Lovie Smith coming into Illinois.
Yeah, he's so stubborn in the sense that, like, I think he's going to refuse for this to fail. or at least put every single chip on the table he can to refuse for it to fail. Because you're right, like legacy, the way he's viewed, an FU to the NFL for not giving him that other chance after New England. I think all that would probably play into play here. And we know he knows football. We know he's a good football mind. The recruiting is really interesting to me because I think your first thought is like a haven for 4 and 5 stars to come through there. And that may well be the case because he's Bill Belichick and he knows. But if you just kind of saw how he built in New England, like there are going to be some of those,
right? Like he reached.
There are going to probably be some under the radar guys, like that. North Carolina beat insert very low, low group of 5 power force or group of 5 school for this prospect.
Like that's what Lovie Smith was good at. Was finding Sidney Brown and Devin Witherspoon and guys like that. Like finding those dudes. Like even an Isaiah Gay was committed to Elon, I believe it was at the time. Like he found good players. Like he knew what to look for and how to develop them. It was just kind of keeping them in his program and, keeping coaches and hiring the right coaches. So, yeah, I think that's going to be huge Belichick. Last one before we get out.
How do you think this is going to compare to the Dion buzz when it first turned to Colorado? Now, it helped Colorado won a ton of games early, so that just got, like, nauseatingly loud.
And we knew Shedeur was good. We knew Travis Hunter. Congratulations, Travis, on the Heisman. He was deserving. So was Ashton Ginty. But I voted for Travis Hunter. Did you vote for Ginty first place?
I changed my mind last minute. I don't know that I was sold one way or the other. I just kind of looked at a guy who had 2,000 plus rushing yards and got Boise State to the college football playoff, and that was really significant for me. But Travis Hunter is probably the best player.
Yeah, I saw the best corner who also was a top 5 wide receiver. We've never seen it before. This is way different than anything Charles Woodson did, and Charles Woodson was one of the best defensive backs of all time. But that was kind of gimmicky with how they did the Heisman then, getting him some touches at wide receiver. Like Travis Hunter was a stud receiver. Both of them were awesome. Both were deserving of it. It was clear 1-2 for me. But compared to Dion, ESPN's gonna go all in on this. But Dion was, whether you like him or not, like he plays for the cameras, right? Like he's gonna play for that stuff. And obviously his relationship with the media isn't all great, but I think he is much watched television. Does Belichick embrace that? I have my doubts.
All I can think of is they had to get, like in The Office, they had to get like headshots taken for security passes that Dwight wanted, and everyone goes in and they go, Dwight, smile. And he goes, no. Like that's how I'm picturing.
No, Love did that stuff early. Like he went on ESPN and after he was hired and all that. So I think Belichick will do it. And I think this last year helped him do that. But does he do it week 5 when they're 3-2? Like
well, I'm also like, I think Bill Belichick's got a lot of personality. I think you saw that come out a little bit more with his media stuff that he did. Maybe this is just, maybe he'll just let it all go out here, right? Like maybe he will just show more of that personality when it probably matters, because it's not straight up. For as much transactional as college football, college basketball has become, it is not always straight up transactional. Like you've got to be a guy that people believe in. So I'm curious if maybe he lets a little bit of that show, because I do think it's there. And I think he's shown flashes of that being there. I think he's, you've seen kind of clips of him here or there, and he's got a little bit of a dry sense of humor. Will he show more of that? I think it'd be cool if he did. I think it'd be awesome to see that side of him that we didn't see while he was just winning Super Bowl after Super Bowl after Super Bowl in New England.
Last thing for you, Barry Odom hired at Purdue. To me, Joey, he's a good coach. And he's got experience at this level. I'm surprised they hired somebody with ties to Ryan Walters, to be honest with you, but obviously he did great stuff at UNLV. He's coached at Missouri and had at least a little bit of success there. Not to what Missouri wanted. But this felt like a hire of like, we don't want to win 2 games in a year or 1 game in a year anymore. Like, let's get to just being a solid program again. That's what this hire felt like to me.
Yeah, I thought they would go somebody a little bit more offensive
that's
driven.
Their identity.
Yeah, that's, and I don't believe, Jeremy, that I have seen many staffing hires come out of.
I haven't either. No.
Which is interesting, because if you're bringing in a defensive guy after a defensive guy, and after you've had so much success with more offensively driven coaches, would have thought that if I remember right, Ryan Walters had Graham Harrell pretty quickly. So I'm curious what that's going to look like. And I'm a little surprised you haven't seen much more come out of that yet. I thought they would have gone more offensive because that's what Purdue has been. But I'm with you. I think they want to get that floor up, the higher, because that floor got really, really low.
Like, wouldn't have Dan Mullen made more sense? Like, he's at UNLV now.
Are we, you could have made the same argument 2 years ago, like Ryan Walters to UNLV, Barry Odom to Purdue back then. I don't know, man.
I just think their two best coaches have been Jeff Brom and Joe Tiller, right? Over the last, modern history. I just lean into that. Like Helton at Western Kentucky made a lot of sense. I know
Cradle of quarterbacks. All of a sudden, where's that gone?
Yeah, Jason Candle. Yeah, it feels like they've gotten away from that, but we'll see. This is Bobinski's last hire, right? He's retiring in a year, so it's going to be interesting. But I get it. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a solid fundamental coach. He'll definitely get them better than what they were. He's been through this before, but just felt like a floor lifting hire. I don't know how much ceiling he lifted though.
Yeah, two questions. One, when do you think, or how do you think we'll next hear Ryan Walters in the coaching world? Do you think it's in the NFL? Do you think it's a defensive coordinator at kind of a get it right SEC program?
I don't know why, but in the back of my mind, NFL safeties coach has just been ringing with me. Like, it just feels like that's a next step. I think he'd do well in the NFL. He's a really good developer. I think he's a good play caller. But obviously was not ready to be a Big Ten head coach and everything that goes with it. So I think he'll have a market, but is he a group of 5 defensive coordinator? Do you think he'd be an SEC defensive coordinator?
He's had success. I don't know. I mean, if I knew, I would probably.
I think he's worthy of being that. But
he got pretty low at Purdue, right? Like, that's not going to be a sexy hire.
He's got a big buyout. He doesn't have to do anything right away. If he wants to be an analyst somewhere and just hide in the dark for a year, he can do that.
Yeah, but if you can also pretty much hide an NFL safeties coach too, and to be honest, how often do you hear from the Bears position coaches or the Packers position coaches? So I'm curious with that. And I forgot what my second.
I hope he gets another chance to be a head coach someday. I hope he gets back to being that because he's still young. He's 38. And I'm sure he learned a lot the last 2 years of what went wrong, how I went wrong, what I need to do to succeed again. And I think it'll be important for him to find the right fit, right? If it is college, find the right coach you want to learn from. Because I think he learned a lot from Brett Bielema, but felt like wasn't building it the same way at Purdue.
No, I would agree with that. I forgot what my second question was, so I'm just going to leave it at when do we next hear Ryan Walters? I'm sure I'll text you when I figure it out. It won't be quite the – hey, Jeremy Derrick, I'm at Enterprise here, 14 unanswered texts. I'm having a little bit of an 8 a.m. meltdown, but
is the car good?
Got a new car.
What's the plan?
Squared away here. Finally, it's been a long week. Insurance was good for the most part and helping me get that. So
you're okay. Had a little
fender bender. I'm fine. I was more.
It's not my fault.
I drove a Malibu, right? So my knee, when I got rear-ended, my knee went into the steering wheel, and it was honestly fine, like seriously fine. But I get out, and the cop goes, "Are you okay?" It's like, oh, my knee went into the wheel, so that kind of stunk. And he goes, "Do we need an ambulance?" And I looked at him, and I go, "That would annoy me so much more than the pain has annoyed me." I said, "Please no, just get me out of here." Well, okay, got a new car. Finally, time for that. So now we don't have to squeeze. Derek and I are taller gentlemen, so we don't have to squeeze in the Malibu and drive to Lincoln, Nebraska or Minneapolis or wherever we're going.
Yeah. Get to sit up a little higher on the road. Feels good.
It's so weird. And I still get pretty good gas mileage.
There you go.
Win-win.
Technology these days.
And remote start. I've never had that. I've never had CarPlay. So I get in, the car's warm, and it's playing the music I want to hear.
It's phenomenal.
Honestly, mind-blowing.
I've
never been a part of it. Oh, my goodness. What a world.
We live a charmed life. All right. I got nothing else. We've talked for an hour about Illinois football and everything going into it. So we appreciate everyone listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notifications bell. If you're listening on the podcast, make sure you follow us, rate us, review us wherever you get your podcasts, and check out all the latest on Illinois at IlliniInquirer.com. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time on the Illini Inquirer podcast.